right, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you are in the world. This is Kerbal. We are back. We have a very special, very crazy launch for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back playing, well, not Donovan, we are back playing Kerbal Space Program. Oh, and do we have a treat for you today. We have been working very hard over the last couple of days. We've planned this beautiful launch that we have set for you today. If you joined me last time, you saw that we had a spine that we launched into space, and that was pretty fun, actually. That was a little challenge to build, certainly a challenge to launch. But this was a whole different animal for our launch today. We have, well, I should say, the issue with the spine is that some people really liked it and then said, oh, you should build a whole brand new, like, giant Kerbal in space. And people thought that was a real fun idea. I don't think people realized how crazy that was going to be. But as we zoom in closer to our launch pad here, we will see we have 8 of the Making History DLC huge tanks with Rhino engines and Mastodon liquid engines at the bottom. Launching what at the very core? The rib cage. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are launching a rib cage to space. This is going to be, hopefully, we hope this will be a pretty standard launch. We hope no more surprises. We did test this. It does get to orbit with a pretty good fuel margin. I think we went a little overboard with our fuel, but you know what? This is Kerbal Space Program. If you're not going a little overboard, you're not doing it right. So this ribcage has a passenger count with all these little crew cabin, Mark I crew cabins as ribs. It has a crew capacity of 394 just in the ribcage alone. We are going to drain some of our fuel from the actual spine itself. We can actually pump that back over once we're done with our launch. But I have the fuel tanks all set to drain from that, as well as these 3 TX-1800s fuel tanks here. We're actually going to pin this one for our launch, if, of course, we don't crash the game. That's going to be the big question of today. Are we going to break Kerbal Space Program? We've got these attached to a docking port on the bottom, and we're going to manually stage those. Just because we could have done it with a hotkey, but it kind of makes a little more sense with you seeing what I'm doing and how I'm actually launching this ship. We're going to use one of these outer stage fuel tanks, just pin that up there as well, so we know when that's going to stage, roughly speaking. I gotta say, this was a really big challenge to get this thing up to space. I'm glad that I did. I'm hoping that this all works beautifully as we're recording this now. I hate to have it fail and break apart or destroy the launch pad or all the number of things it's done or Kraken related. We are very much tempting the Kraken today. All right. In any event, we have ourselves set up for what we need to do staging-wise. Let's bring up our nav ball again. All right, our thrust is at maximum. SAS is on. We're nice and stable. We're just going to kind of scale ourselves back here, and let's launch this baby. I'm excited. Hope you guys are all excited for this too. Ready? 3, 2, 1. All right, and engines fired. Oh, my graphics are so not happy with me. Woo! Well, we are lifting off. Very slowly, but we are lifting off. And it looks like we're all good there. We've cleared our tower. We are going to make this. Absolutely. I have faith. We're going to do it. I think the total tonnage of this craft, I'd have to double check in the vehicle assembly building. I have to say, I think the total tonnage of this thing, the wet weight, was something like 4,000 tons. A lot of that being the fuel and the booster engines and everything I have going on. But man, it was a it was a real challenge. I figured out real quick that I wanted to do a quad series for this, attaching off the front and the back of the rib cage. But what I was having difficulty with this craft was really getting the right amount of thrust to weight ratio plus the fuel that I was having. I kept getting into suborbital flights for most of the attempts that I've done previously, and it was always like, oh, you're only 300 meters per second of delta V left. You're missing. The issue that you kept having is it just wasn't quite an efficient ascent profile. So I think eventually I just said, you know what, screw it. We're gonna over-engineer this thing way beyond it. We're gonna push the computer. My poor laptop is crying at me right now with my frame rate and my recording at the same time. It's just really not happy with me. So I apologize if the video quality is lower on this. I'm hoping that it'll come out all right on the other side of things. It doesn't look like it's dropped any frames, but I'm hoping that it will look all right when I'm done with it. So right now we're launching vertical. I think we're gonna, if I remember from my previous test launch, it was something like we got certainly at least 9,000 feet. We really didn't start a gravity turn until we were like 14, 16, something like that. It's a very, again, inefficient launch. It's way overpowered for what it needs to be done. But the craft itself is really well stabilized with these 8. This Octa type launch system that we have going on. When we did do the one thing we didn't double check was whether or not these Separatrons will be actually put on these little girders here for the outer sections. We didn't test to see if those actually work properly from when we did the initial one. The first one we didn't have them on there. They just kind of dropped straight down. And then some of the girders exploded on the outer shell. Didn't destroy any of the other internal engines or rocket parts, but we did have a problem with that. I should say a concern with those exploding mid-flight, and thinking once again the Kraken was going to get us. When I first built the ship, it's very much there's a lot of auto strutting going on. We'll just zoom in a little closer while we're in launch here. Nothing's interesting going on right now. You can see there's a couple strut sections. It's very much stable, and we'll get you a closer look at that when we're actually in space and in a good orbit, I should say. Well, we're actually almost done with the outer section, the outer quad launchers, and it has been a challenge. So the idea with this is that, yeah, we had the Kerbal spine that we launched previously, and it's still up there in orbit in this save. But there was no real good way to attach all these ribs the way that I wanted to, the way that it looks kind of now, without some serious modifications and a lot of extra what you call it? Oh, there's one explosion. Whew. That looks like we're okay. Yeah. Gotta pay attention. So there's no, what was I saying? There's no good way to attach all those ribs without a lot of extra docking ports. It really wouldn't have worked without kind of clipping them in together and making it more more or less anatomically correct. There's no way to get it perfect. Everyone's ribs are also a little bit different, but there's just no way that you can really get it to work with all the docking ports and make it look like ribs. It would just kind of all be tangled up, messed up, whatever. So you see we got these fuel tanks on the bottom here. We're actually going to detach those off as soon as they're done. Just lose a little bit more mass, make ourselves a little more efficient. It's probably minimal, but this is when we were originally working on with boosters, with other things on the outside, and we just kept it there just because there is a docking port on the bottom and on the top of the rib cage, so that we can actually attach the rest of the spine once we make those and send those up into orbit. But for right now, we just have the thoracic spine and rib cage all attached here is one large section. I've been bouncing this idea around on one of the groups that I'm on Facebook, and just kind of taking a look at a few things. And some people ask, is there, you forgot spots for the arms to go or other stuff like that. And some interesting things about anatomy, at least human anatomy, is that the arms don't actually attach to the rib cage itself. What they actually attach to is your scapula on the back, that floats on the back of your rib cage, and that directly attaches to your clavicle, your collarbone. So what we are doing here, more or less, now we can switch to map mode since we're way out here. So what we the clavicle and the scapula are the only real attachments for the upper extremity, for the arm, to actually attach to the spine. And that clavicle only attaches at the scapula, and also at the front of your chest and your sternum. So that's the only way that your entire arm is really attached to your body, to your central core. Your lower extremities are more directly attached into the pelvis, but this is a fairly good representation of what it's actually like. I know. I think the idea with this eventually will be just a giant Jebediah Kerman in space. I think that's what we're going to end up going for with this launch, or with this this gigantic Kerbal in space. As I said, we're pushing the limits of my own my own computer, my poor laptop, but we're also doing a pretty good job of just playing with the physics of the game and seeing how far we can push it. I can't remember how many parts this whole thing was. I'm sure when I get a chance, I'll tell you guys maybe in the description section of this video once I post it to YouTube. I'll actually say the crew capacity once again, but I'll say what was the what was the part count, what was the total mass of the spine, or so the rib cage itself versus the full mass. So I'll try and get that sort of details out there for everybody. But right there, we're gonna try for about 100, and that we are now in space. So now we have SAS going. We need to I shouldn't have slipped out. We need to plan our next maneuver. We have a minute or so to do it. There's unfortunately a good lag because I am running so hot on my computer right now. There we go. That's a little better. Oh, that's pretty good. Do that. Start getting ourselves set up. So it's going to be roughly a 25 seconds before the node. We should be okay. And yeah, we have gobs of delta V left. We have 2,446 meters per second of delta V. This, just to circularize, is going to be 1,300. It wasn't the most efficient. I feel like I say that with every video. It wasn't the most efficient launch, but it's going to get up there. So it's going well, honestly, all things considered. Now we may have to burn just a little bit before this because I don't think we have enough reaction wheel control to kind of spin ourselves around. We are burning through electric charge, so. Ooh. Tell you what we're going to do. We're actually going to do a slow burn just to help ourselves pitch a little bit more over. Remember, it was about 25 seconds before the node. It's just a little trick to kind of get yourself orientated right without losing too much time spinning around. We never would have gotten this back around to what we needed to point in terms of our maneuver node without this little bit of fuel usage. And it's not doing much. It's just getting us pointed in the right direction. Give us a little positive direction. Alright, and let's say that's good. We go full bore. Light the candles. That's beautiful. So it's a little off from what we did, but it's not going to be a big deal. We're going to have no problem circularizing here, getting this finally up into orbit over Kerbin. And as I said, there's our Kerbal spine that we launched last time, still up in orbit, up in the 150,000. We certainly had enough delta V to make this go a little higher, but you know, for sanity's sake. For all the work that we put into making this craft, I'm just glad it's finally in orbit. Look at this. It's only taken us 4 minutes and 42 seconds to launch this baby. So we're doing pretty good. Now, the thing that we're probably going to do individually, we can either let these rockets burn back up upon re-entry, or we can try to land them again. We're probably just going to let them burn up. There's enough fuel in them that we could land them. We don't have any landing legs. We'd be basically landing them on the engines. We'd have to do some suicide burns, which, you know, we certainly could do if you're trying to build this craft too, which I think I'll probably make the craft file available for anybody who wants. But if you're trying to land them yourself, by all means, do that. You know, land them back on the VAB, whatever you guys want to do. I had somebody tell me I should land the whole Kerbal spine and Jeb Kerman on the VAB itself as well. I think that it's going a little excessive. I don't think anybody would appreciate me. I don't think people back at Kerbal Space Command would really appreciate me landing a skeleton Jeb Kerman from space on the top of the VAB. But anyways, there we are. We are in orbit. So I have two options right now. I can either well, I can do a few things. I need to try to stop myself from spinning a little bit. Just a little bit, people. Come on. It's probably not going to. So what I want to do is I'm trying to get all these spine segments that I... Let's click these so I don't lose them. I want to get all these spine segments refueled. I could do this at a later episode. I could just do this now. Since I have the fuel, I might as well do it now. This also just kind of shows you, for anyone who doesn't know how to do this, how you can actually transfer fuel. So what I'm doing is I'm just holding the Alt button on my computer, and I'm right-clicking on the fuel tank that I want to select. And that just brings us up. And by pinning these, if I happen to accidentally click out of it or anything like that, I'll manage to keep those on the screen. So once I've got all these selected, and I'm going to select the ones on the front of the spine and sternum, it's 12 vertebrae plus the sternum. Fairly good amount of fuel, but we should have enough, even just in one of the tanks, to refill all of this. And as soon as we got this last one here, we're just going to pick an arbitrary tank. They all have roughly the same. Once we have those all, we put this one off to the side. These are all going to fill if I tell this one to put fuel on the out. So that's really it for just fuel transfers. Now it's just going to take whatever amount of time to transfer all that fuel over. We could speed this up with a little physics warp. I always worry about that in space, just because certainly with running as maxed out on my computer's graphics and everything else, I worry about crashing the game, and I'd hate to do that now that I officially have it in orbit. Let's see, but it'll just take a little time. We'll kind of talk a little bit about the don't really want to talk about the design, but yeah, this has been a really interesting challenge, and I look forward to doing more of it. Bring that all off the screen for now. You see some of the aerodynamic overlay. But yeah, this is pretty much the bottom of a Saturn V rocket times 8 to launch this thing into space. Like I said, we have tons of Delta V left over, so we absolutely could have done this more efficiently, less boosters, all that sort of stuff. But after fighting with this for a day or so, I just said, to heck with it. We're going to do it the Kerbal way and launch it as powerfully as we can into space. So that thoracic spine that you see in the back there, that's all the same spine that we had from the previous Kerbal. We just basically took that off and basically cut it off at the cervical and thoracic part of the spine. And then we just started attaching ribs to our docking port down there. And we have 12 ribs, all anatomically more or less correct. I wish I could just not bother with this fuel transfer at the moment and give you guys a better shot of the rib cage itself. Hopefully we get that before we end up on the dark side of Kerben here. But as you see, they're all attaching on the bottom. And normally speaking, in actual ribs, they actually attach on the spine here, but they actually also have attachment at these what they call transverse processes that come off of the spine as well. So there's two articulations, what they're called. And then they attach to cartilage that's actually then attached to the sternum itself. That's why you can actually hear pops in the front of your chest if you kind of arch your back a little bit, and those are same sort of cavitations that you get. Same sort of thing that you have when you kind of crack your knuckles, sort of thing. So those are those little tiny docking ports I was talking about that are actually going to attach to the clavicle, and that's going to come over in maybe one or two more episodes or one or two more builds of trying to do this thing. But yeah, the rib cage itself kind of barrels out a little bit and gets widest around the 7th or so rib, and then it kind of tapers back up, and they start curling back towards the sternum a little bit. There's only only the first 7 ribs truly attached from the back of the spine to the front of the sternum, or the sides of the sternum. From there, the rest of them actually start attaching into each other. That's why you will see when I give you a better front shot of this, why you see the yellow monopropellant that's kind of mimicking cartilage, so to speak. They actually are supposed to connect into each other, into the rib above itself, and then of course the last 2 ribs are called false ribs or floating ribs. They don't have any sort of attachment to the front, and they just kind of dangle off the ends a little bit. Still protect things like kidneys and other stuff like that, but I digress. I've gone off on a tangent of anatomy while we have this should be still going over. Why are we not transferring fuel anymore? Oh, that's why. I click things. I click things, and then all of a sudden I'm not transferring fuel anymore. I apologize to my viewers, to whoever's watching at this point. Thank you for watching. Well, I will absolutely give you a good view of this thing before it's said and done. Let's see, can we time warp and not break things? I don't want to go any faster than that. Times 3 physics warp. I really, really, really don't want this to break apart. I would cry. I really would cry. Man, it is the thing of beauty, and I'm looking forward to making this whole thing. When this video is all said and done and whatnot, make sure you guys leave a like and a comment below. I'm not doing this. It's not a monetized channel or anything like that. I'm just doing this for fun. But I'd like to see where you guys' take was on this video. See what you think about the rib cage going up into space. Like I said, we're gonna have some more things. We're gonna attach to it and build it, and eventually it'll be a huge skeleton. I thought briefly about what I want to do with it once it's all assembled in space. I sort of have an idea in my head in terms of what I want to do. The idea that I have is actually to take it out of Kerbin's orbit and kind of do a little tour of the solar system. Maybe like I'm not gonna take the Eve where it's gonna just get demolished. But I could see taking it to. I could put some fairly powerful but still efficient, maybe some vector engines or something like that, on the bottom of Jeb's feet, and try to land this thing on like the Mun. I guess that's we'll call that the hard way of getting a Kerbal on the Mun. So yeah, we'll see if that's something that we can do. Lord knows if the game will even let me get to that point. I fully expect the space kraken to gobble up this poor skeletal Kerbal well before I get it landing anywhere, let alone going anywhere. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens when that's all said and done. Right now, I'm just trying to kill time while this fuel transfer finishes out. Only because I want you guys to see this thing in the light and I'm probably losing some of that anyways as it's traveling around Kerbin while it's refueling. But we'll definitely give you guys at least a good look at this thing from all angles before we end this video off. But yeah, that's almost done there. Awesome. All right. Now we're done with that. Let's bring that back down to normal times warp. Click out of all these screens. All right. So as I said, we have tons of fuel left in this thing. You see, we're losing electric charge right now, but that's because we're trying to hold ourselves in a particular state. I probably should let the. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna do that. We're gonna time warp ourselves around to the light side of Kerbin, I should say. Man, that's so cool. Love that. Love that spine just hanging out in space. We're going to time warp ourselves around. This is actually right around when we get to the closest with our Kerbal spine on the dark side. I think we get to within 50 kilometers of it, pretty much right below it. Since it's at 150, we're at 100. But we're just trying to get some more electric charge in there in case we ended up deciding to, land those silly boosters that we took up here. It's just far too much fuel for what it actually needs. The way we're generating electricity right now is actually RTGs that we have embedded in the spine itself. So that's part of the reason why I haven't detached things yet. It's because if we detach them, those boosters wouldn't get any more, wouldn't have any more electric charge, pretty much. And I don't think we have anything attached to the spine itself. That is a. I don't think we have any battery banks, if I remember the design correctly. All right. Well, there she is, still attached, still good. And now the moment of truth, I guess you could say. We need to see if this last stage will not destroy anything. So let's separate it out and hope. All right, so we should be separated. Looks like we are. Yep, looks like we are. Slowly thrust away those boosters there, and there we go. So as those fall away, we get to take a nice good look at our spine. And there she is in all her glory. Let's see if we can get this to spin around. I don't think so. Yeah, we only have 15 electric charge. We have 2 RTGs, but don't really have the electric charge to handle it. But there it is. Let's get this off the screen. So the full spine, all attached. You can see we had not only the auto strut enabled on all of these parts, but we had to have additional extra strutting, which is perfectly fine. When it comes to anatomy, there's ligaments and fascia, like soft tissue that is actually attached in between each of these ribs and everything. So that's perfectly fine to be technically and anatomically correct. I wish this would flip over our camera view or something like that. There we go. So yeah, there she is, that beautiful spine with the mun and the sun in the background. So yeah, it's interesting. You could probably fly a ship through here. I wouldn't suggest it, but you certainly could fly a ship right through there. But that is it, I think, for this episode. I think that's a pretty good enough challenge as it is, just to kind of see how this all works and puts together. But that is it. I am Kerbal. Thank you guys for showing up. Thank you for liking the video. Follow and subscribe on YouTube. And if you guys are in that Kerbal Space Program group chat that we're a part of there, send a like there as well. All right. You guys have a great day. This is Kerbal signing off for the evening.